Morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Recently, in USA, the Minnesota University jury found Derek guilty of killing George Floyd. You remember George Floyd, a drug addict, a criminal, was found roaming around and he was challenged by the police. He resisted arrest. The officer had this man down with a knee on his neck. And as luck would have it, the person died. With the result, they were rushed. And the former police officer has now been convicted of unintentional second degree murder, third degree murder, as well as second degree manslaughter. Imagine 3 punishments for one crime. And the jurisprudence says that you cannot be punished twice for the same crime. Was this judiciary a political one? Was the decision taken by the jury a judicious one, or is it a kangaroo court basically catering to the politically correct democratic culture? Imagine a country where rule of law is supposed to be supreme. Imagine a country where jury trials are deemed a sine qua non of democracy and human rights because your equals punish you. But then consider the fact that the president of that country starts saying that I'm praying for the conviction of the guilty. Who gave the president the right to declare him guilty before the jury and the court had declared him? And it was Biden who, praying publicly, said that the evidence is overwhelming that Chauvin is guilty. Derek Chauvin. The Chauvin's defense hinged largely on the fact that Floyd, when he died, the post-mortem was conducted and it was found that he was overdosed on fentanyl and meth. The fentanyl is a drug which causes death. Could he have not died because of that? And that is what is claimed to be the defense. Now, Minnesota guidelines state that for the crimes for which the jury has convicted Derek, he can go to prison for 12 years for unintentional murder and up to 40 years for second degree murder. So this cop, the custodian of peace and order, a peace officer, no criminal history, goes to jail up to 40 years. Given the circumstances of the trial, we'll never be sure whether the trial is fair or not. The propaganda media, the radical Democrats, including the members of the Congress and the president, did everything they could do to terrify jurors and witnesses. And then, terrified as they were, they didn't want to annoy the authorities. They did not want to annoy the president. They did not want to annoy the congressmen and women. They did not want to annoy the local governor. So they said, well, he is guilty. A bloody, seared pig's head was found in the front door of one of the expert witnesses who was testifying on behalf of Derek, showing that in the way This pig has been killed, so can your head be cut off. Black Lives Matter protested made it perfectly clear that they would indulge in riots and engulf the nation in flames if Derek was not convicted. And then comes Representative Maxine Waters, the notorious Black Lives Matter protege and promoter. And she says, I hope we get a verdict that says guilty, guilty, guilty. And if we don't get it, now this is a law and order representative of the people saying it. If we don't get the verdict guilty, we are not going away. We are going to stay on the streets. We'll get more active. We'll get more confrontational. We will get to show them that we mean business. And when a legislator, when the representative of a nation makes such a remark, and that before the jury has been sequestered, the jury is still sitting, is an open court, and so much was the illegality of this statement of Waters that judge had compelled to remark that Waters' inflammatory remarks could result in the trial being overturned on appeal. So the judge was aware that legally he is helpless. He doesn't want to convict him. And this statement by Maxine Waters has played havoc with the judicial system. And if there's appeal, which there would be, this punishment would be overturned. It's a mistrial. It's a prejudice trial. It's a kangaroo court, as they said it. You see, he was very clear that the jurors were intimidated into a ruling they did not truly believe. And the trial judge is saying so. Would the higher courts not accept it? The rioting that started after George Floyd's death last year killed at least 30 people. And the financial loss to the nation was $2 billion. We will never know how much fear the rioting impacted by the jury's decision, whether or not Chauvin was guilty. But this trial is not a trial. It's a media trial. It's a classic example of mob justice. There was a comment by Mr. Singh Jaspal saying that would the decision had been taken if Trump was the president? I would say yes, possibly, but you cannot be sure. If there was exploratory evidence, then it would have been released. He was doing his job, he was performing his job. And he called the medics. The medical attendants were working on him, and the man was dead, of course. But the presence of the drugs itself in the system shows that the man would possibly have died otherwise, even. Quite possible that putting a knee on the back suffocated him to some extent. But whether it was the result of that, I don't think so. Another question arises, would the mob be appeased even if Derek gets 40 years in prison? Or would it increase their appetite for more bloodshed, for more attacks on the police? But then another thing which happens, I was talking to a very senior judicial officer, and he told me that being convicted by second and third degree murder, as well as manslaughter, all in one go is not acceptable because they are mutually exclusive. He says, well, Thank God that they did not convict Derek of assault and battery as well. The charges were so arranged so that jury could pick and choose. Normally, the alternatives are given one, two, three, and jury says, "Okay, he's innocent of these two, but he's guilty of this." But this is out of fear. Jury chose all the three, but then it goes in favor of Derek because it gives his defense team another point to show how the trial and the judgment was rigged. It looks like that the cultural Marxism and political correctness has trumped justice. In this case, it did. The jury was doxxed, terrified. They feared their homes would be burned. They feared they would die. They feared their dear and near ones would suffer assault. And they didn't want mass rioting and, if possible, death on their collective conscience. So, okay, let's sacrifice this one man who was upholding justice. Now, coming back to Jaspal's command that Trump would have been different, there would have been one difference that people would have known that even if he is declared guilty by the jury, within a matter of hours of conviction, the president would pardon. Full pardon would have been there. So the jury would have been careful. Why do something which is not going to be of any benefit at all? But when the President Biden said that there's overwhelming evidence in the case against Derek and making clear that he believes he is guilty, is in fact giving a hint to the jury and to the judge, look here, Mr. Judge, you want to be promoted? You want to move from this city court to the district court or to the Supreme Court? Then you are jolly well convict this man. When he says, I'm praying the verdict is the right side, what is right side? The people who kill more than 30 people and cause a damage of 2 billion, a drug addict, a convicted felon, or a member of the police force. Biden made the comments in the jury as the jury deliberated. And that is what was wrong. And before that, he had called up on phone the family of Floyd and told them that he hopes he'll be convicted. It is very unusual for a president to weigh in such a case, especially on marriage, before a verdict. And yet, Biden did it. What was his compulsion? I can't say. Then coming to Rep. Maxine Waters, he said that they'll get more confrontational. Now, this is promoting illegal activity, lawlessness. And as a matter of fact, Nancy Pelosi defended Waters, saying that we have got to make sure. And then she said that this is justified because she represents the civil rights. So if you represent civil rights, you can always tell people go and burn and kill because a black guy has been killed. I'm against racial discrimination. Let me be very clear. Nobody has a right even to harm, much less kill, a person simply because he's black in color. No, this is absolutely unacceptable. But should, at the same time, a colored person take benefit of this reservation that blacks should not be discriminated against and become a criminal? and then pose innocent. Can you believe there's a minority leader, Kevin McCarthy? He has said that Waters needs to be censored and removed, basically. Now, what would be the impact of this trial? One thing it will show whether the Black Lives Matter protests have some power left or not. And it's very clear that they are becoming very more powerful, that the mafia which controls them. And this will result in organized crime being more successful. You don't take action against an individual criminal. How can you take action against organized crime? And under the best circumstances, police officers are not committing a murder because they argued that what they did was reasonable. They had no personal enmity. No evidence has been shown that Derek was personal enemy of Floyd. He even didn't know him. They had never met. He was just performing his job. Nobody denies, and I fully agree that the police system all over the world needs to be reformed. Yes, but this conviction would be a departure from the practice and will send the signal to the police that this kind of behavior is not acceptable. And better thing is, if somebody is committing a crime, let him or her keep on committing a crime. Don't interfere. Why should you put your head on the guillotine? And suppose he is not. It signals that no matter how bad the behavior is, the police are to be supported and get away with killing unarmed men, which is not possible. So basically, the whole case has been wrongly contested. It should not have been contested in Minnesota, the place where the crime was committed, so called crime. The case should have been heard, say, in Texas, in Utah, in Washington, or in New York, far away. It's a pivotal movement in the American and the human culture. Because what's happening in USA today is going to happen in other countries tomorrow. For example, in India, if the police does something, they'll say, look here, they are killing because we are Sikhs or we are Marathas or we are Dalits or things like that. It's very easy to assume and adopt a victim card. And the victim card has been used by people. We can't deny it. A conviction for Derek is a brief sigh of relief, but it spoils a systemic culture of law and order. Justice looks at the facts, and justice makes a fair determination, and this has not been done. As a matter of fact, if you look at it, we find that it has been a politically motivated conviction. Nobody can deny that he was doing a political police maneuver taught by the police department. The fentanyl system was 4 times the toxic limit, and he had other drugs also. And then nothing. He had an enlarged heart. How could police officer believe that such a doped up, such a drugged, very big, huge, muscular fly was really having a genuine health emergency? He could not. And who knows that once he had lifted the knee, this might have simply been an expert in martial art and killed the police officer. Let's be very clear that what Water has done is she has borrowed a tactic right out of the deep south of the early 20th century. You remember in the what's happening in India now, Pakistan, in the early 20th of 19th century, 20th century, the elected politicians would organize protests and demonstration by white voters, where the racial child trials were conducted. The politicians would threaten that the violence would follow if the black was not convicted. And here, just the situation is reversed. If the white is not convicted, there will be riots. So what used to happen in 1920s has happened today. Then the judge has been at fault. Why did he not sequester the jury? Why was the jury open to all the information? In such a sensitive trial, the judge should have said, okay, right from the word go, the jury would not be entitled to any media, social, main, print, digital, electronic. When the blood was sprayed on the house of a witness, why was the action not taken? Actually, this is an identity politics which is being played. And who would suffer? The American people, the system of law and order. And 9 out of 10 chances are that the conviction will be overturned when the appeal is there. And the trial judges very correctly suggested it's going to happen. But he was a coward. He did not have the courage to grant a defense motion for mistrial. Actually, what he should have done is very simply this is a mistrial, and if the prosecution wants, they can prosecute him again. So the trial would have started de novo. And this impact of Biden and Waters would have watered down, to have been reduced. It was a serious error on the part of the judge. And jurors have not followed the judge's instruction. They were meeting their friends, families, media, TV shows, and that's not done. Now, let's be very clear justice is not black and white, it requires calibration. It needs common sense calibration, nuance, and careful evaluation. And this case shows no sign of common sense nuance. As a matter of fact, one Black Lives spokesman said there shouldn't be a trial. The man should just be convicted and sent to jail. I don't want to say it then, but we need to start killing all white folk. This is what the black people were saying. And when another representative, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she says, verdict is not justice. We want justice. I want this movement to be framed as a movement where the system should work. In other words, she would not be happy till all the police force officers, not only Derek, but there were 3 officers with him, they are also convicted. Minnesota Attorney General says that is not true restoration. It's only accountability. And I say your hands, I mean the hands of the people of USA. And then Obama publishes a statement saying that jury did a rightful thing. Fine. Obama can say it because he is a private citizen. But Biden, Waters, and Ocasio-Cortez saying so is a criminal offense. They should be prosecuted. You can't prosecute the president, but you can prosecute Waters and you can prosecute Alexandria. The judgment is basically not a judicious decision. It's a kangaroo court verdict given to assuage the Black Lives Matter, the politicians who have their own agendas which do not promote justice. But this is a watershed in the history of judicial system that wrong forever on the throne, right forever on the scaffold. Unfortunate, saddening, but that's the situation today, not only in USA, but all over the world. You have got to live with it. Until and unless the systemic changes take place, and I'm gloomy about that prospect. Thank you.